We'll call the City Council special meeting to order. Clerk, please call the roll.
Councilperson Whitman.
Here.
Kilgrave.
She is detained, but she'll be here.
Vining. Here. Germaine.
Here.
Lamore.
Present.
Felder. Here. Mayor Clark.
So we have some items here on our special meeting this evening. Mr. Pastu, I don't know if you wanted to review anything going in, or if not, it's on the agenda.
Just the request to go into closed session for labor discussions.
Very well. Councilman Lamore.
Yes, Your Honor, I'd like to make a motion to go into closed executive session for the purpose of labor relations.
Councilman Lamore, supported by Councilwoman Germaine, to go into a closed executive session for the purpose of labor relations. Clerk, please call the roll.
Whitman. Yes. Vining.
Yeah.
Germaine.
Yes.
Lamore.
Yes.
Felder. Yes. Mayor Clark.
Yes.
Please.
Okay, we are back. We need a motion to go back into open session.
Motion to go back into open session.
Motion by Councilwoman Morse, by Councilwoman Vining. Clerk, please call the roll.
Councilperson Whitman. Stillgrave. Yes. Vining. Yes. Jermaine. Yes. Lamore.
Yes.
Felder. Yes. Mayor Clark.
Yes. So, Mr. Pastu, we have some discussion items. I think you're going to adjust the order here.
Thank you. Yeah, if we could go to the discussion item related to Basin Run, Basin Run development. Put that on, if we could. As indicated in the fact sheet for this work session, we'd met with the developer, expressed some interest with the infill development. The high property, which is north of Lorraine, is one of our, contained in our goals and objectives to consider a sub-area plan. And as we were looking at it this last week, we thought, there's some challenges associated with the site, the detail and the specification of the site plan, but also some of the pattern book that goes along with it. And so we kind of wanted to go through it and give you a little background on it, and then open for some discussion about where we go from here, because it will dictate particularly what we might do with the high property, and again, how we approach some of the infill development potential that may be there. So, Mark?
Sure. And I know Attorney Buds and I are going to tag team with this discussion, but as Vince alluded to last week, or over the holidays, I was approached by a developer who's interested in finishing the Mason Run neighborhood, particularly north of Noble Avenue, where the lots are privately owned. And so we met with him last week. He brought down some planned elevations and floor plans and such that he was interested in building. And to which we responded with the information related to the PUD agreement, the site plan, and the pattern book, which govern the development of Mason Run. Subsequently, having some discussion, I think one of the things we've talked with council about over the past few years with council goals and objectives is looking at how do we increase residential development in the city. Obviously, finishing the Mason Run neighborhood has been a top priority, and I think a desire of both city council, administration, and I know the surrounding neighborhood as well. But so we wanted to just have a discussion with city council tonight about some of the challenges that we're going to encounter, whether we're working with this developer or anybody else, for the high property, commonly known above, north of the Mason Run property, south of the Greenwood apartment development, as well as the area north of Noble, below the or south of the high property, and then also the property that's owned by the city, which is Phase 5 of Mason Run. So what you'll see on the screen, I know it's hard to read, so I'm going to zoom in here. Particularly, I'm going to zoom in on what is Phase 3, which is the unfinished portion north of Noble Avenue and south of what would be the extension of Lorraine Street, which was started but never finished through. So you'll see there's already designated lots in the site plan for Mason Run. You'll see, I can zoom in a little bit further, might make it easier just for an example. For every parcel, there's delineated lot width as well as a lot number. And then you'll see these codes, these letter codes on each property, a V, a C, an N. In other areas, they vary as well. But that is a designation that relates back to the pattern book for Mason Run. The pattern book is a legal document, which is, and Matt can correct me if I'm using any of the wrong terminology or language, but by virtue of a deed restriction, the pattern book guides how each lot can be developed into the future. And so those codes are specific to a type of house. And so there's a site plan for the entire Mason Run neighborhood. For your orientation purposes, Phase 1 is Don't ask me the rhyme or reason for the numbering. We haven't quite figured that out. But phase 1 is this area that's south at Elm Avenue at Crescent Park. Phase 2 is this area toward the west. Phase 3 is north of Noble. Phase 4 is north of Lorraine Street. Phase 5 jumps back, and this is where most of the vacant city-owned property behind the Battlefield Education Center is. So for the entire neighborhood is laid out according to the site plan. And then when you look at the site plan, you have to go back to the pattern book. And I'll say, we dug out the documents that govern the neighborhood. And just so you can see, that's the PUD guidelines as well as the pattern book, and we have to go back to these to look at every single house within the neighborhood. I think the residential neighborhood was developed with well intentions. Certainly, it's got a very unique feel, characteristic, and development concepts related back to the principles of new urbanism back in 1999 and early 2000s. But the challenge that we're running into is finding a developer who would be interested and willing and able to fulfill the requirements within the pattern book. And so what we want to talk to City Council about is there an opportunity to take a look at the Mason Run neighborhood, maintain the characteristics of the neighborhood, but look at opportunities for some flexibility in completing the development. This is an example for going back to the site plan for any property that has a V on it. Those are called the village lots. And at the bottom, you'll see all the requirements related to the village lot. All the way specific, actually I wanted to go up to one of the different ones because you'll see it talks about the placement of a fireplace. Fireplaces must be located a minimum of 8 feet behind the front facade. Fireplaces on side street facades must have a chimney. Very specific down to even the design of a house in terms of the colors, the color palette, which is not uncommon in neighborhoods, but also the location of the driveways, the garages, the types of eaves troughs that can be built on the house. So very, very specific, and it's done intentionally so that the neighborhood is laid out so that not one house is built cookie cutter the same next to it, so that there's very unique characteristics that go back to the concepts of new urbanism. And so it would be very complicated to go back and undo all of this, which I don't think is anybody's intent, but we wanted to start the discussion and see if City Council would like administration, including Attorney Buds, to take a look at what are our legal options, particularly in the area north of Noble Avenue and impacting the high property, to look at some different guidelines or restrictions as it goes into finishing the Mason Run development. I'll say these documents are available on the city's website too, if you'd like to take some time to crack into them. I did have a conversation with a resident of Mason Run this morning, who saw this was on the agenda tonight and wanted to know what was going on. Obviously, we've had a lot of discussion over the past year from some residents in Mason Run who have wanted to make some changes to their property. I don't think some of the changes that have been proposed over the past year are ones that we would be looking at. I think what we're looking at is the stringent guidelines in terms of some of the design characteristics of the house. I don't think we're looking to make it less dense of a neighborhood, change the setbacks, change the lot lines, or change the characteristics, the looks, and the feel for why many residents have moved into the neighborhood overall. Just looking possibly for some flexibility to work with developers to finish the neighborhood. Matt, Vince, I don't know if you have.
So I'll say from my perspective, Mayor and Council, that I think Mark has laid it out well, that there are, I'll say, difficulties in having the development built out, particularly when we look, I'll say from my perspective, You have everything that is south of Noble, which I would say I consider sort of the more built out. I'll say, even though we might not have the phase numbers exactly right, the original closest to Elm, I think I'll say from my perspective, there should be strong consideration given to preserving everything about that neighborhood and the way that it was intended to be built. I think the further north you get, the less developed it has been, the more that there should at least be some consideration for are there ways to be flexible with that property that remains. I also want to say one thing is that the high property was included in this as a concept in terms of the description of the property, but at that point in time, that's when Crosswinds had an option to purchase that property, and if that option wasn't exercised, then the agreement is pretty specific that it says that the city can amend that agreement to say that then these restrictions would not apply to what is part of what we would commonly call the high property. So I think that there's definitely a distinction to be made there as far as what the city has available for options. Where I think we get into probably the most difficult decisions are the area that I'm going to say is between Noble and Lorraine, where there's areas that are, I'll say, largely vacant, some of the lots that are there. And when you have a scenario where, I'll just say it right, this agreement, this PUD agreement goes back to 2000, essentially when it was signed. If it's been that long that we haven't had a developer willing to come in and finish out precisely to the letter of what's in the pattern book, I'll say I think it's going to be difficult to ever find someone to do that. That isn't to say that I'm recommending in any way throw out the concepts of new urbanism, throw out the character of the neighborhood. I'm not saying that at all. I'm saying you find a developer who may be willing to work with you on preserving that character of the neighborhood. What type of houses were there? What type of setbacks? Can we say, to use the terms of the PUD agreement itself, that everything that would be proposed would attempt to conform to the traditional neighborhood or urban design principles in the Charter for New Urbanism, and I know Mark's got some of these documents there, that were really the key things that went into trying to design this neighborhood. And, having, I'll say, expertise of those that are experienced with traditional neighborhood and urban design to make sure that what we're doing is consistent with what the character and intent for the neighborhood was, while allowing some evolution, recognizing that it's been now 25 years plus, we're coming up on 25 years of unfortunate it not being completed. So that's my general outlook on where I think we stand.
Screen. These are some of the details we would like to look at. So not necessarily the character and the setup and design of the neighborhood, but the PUD or the pattern book goes so far as to dictate what kind of surrounding a front door needs to have. So I think we all want to make sure that the facades of the houses look nice, that they're unique, that they don't all look like Pleasantville, so to speak. But is there flexibility in, the size of the shutters, the surrounding of the front door? The pattern book is even so specific as to what type of bush needs to be planted where on every house. Very specific. It was very, very unique and specific to Crosswinds. But we know that there's a lot of other developers out there who have their own look and feel that we would want to make sure that any residential structure that they build in the neighborhood would fit into the existing neighborhood, whether it's Mason Run or the surrounding neighborhood like Michigan Avenue, Maple, and the other streets in the neighborhood.
So I have a couple of questions, and I think maybe Councilman Mark, can you go back to the, I'll say the plat drawing where it shows the lot, that there. So I see that, which would be the end of phase 3 to the north, which is not completed, would be near Lorraine, and then phase 4 is phase 4 that's on there part of the high property? No, high property, or does high property start at the end of where phase 4 is on this map? I was curious where the high property started.
Yeah.
So phase 4 is the high property.
There's parts of it that are part of the high property from where the streets were platted. Right. But what you see on the screen, phase 4 is some of the privately owned property.
Right, but there's none of the homes are built in phase 4. No, because that's outside of Lorraine. So looking at the lots that are to the other side of Lorraine, between Lorraine and Noble, there's currently kind of a pond or a retention. That wasn't? It appears to be it was intended to be built. It's between Elliott and Lorraine, where all those houses are.
Yeah.
Is that the intent to build houses there and adjust that? And then along with that, so I can answer at the same time, the lots, they were very specific, 40 some feet, 35 feet. Is there discussion that we would adjust that, or would stay that the lot sizes?
So the lot sizes would not change.
Okay.
They would remain as they're laid out presently.
That's right. Okay. So the question on there by Lorraine Street, it's a pond. It's sunk and there's wildlife in there. So is that an issue of
Inadvertent wetlands.
Yes.
That's been discussed and looked into. Those are some of the privately owned lots right now. So.
Okay. So it's the thought that it would not be built there then, or?
There hasn't been any assessment of it. We're aware of what the conditions are.
Okay.
So there's 26 lots that are currently owned by the successor of Crosswinds Community. The lot that you're referring to that appears to be wetlands is not one of those 26 lots. That's owned by somebody else.
Okay. Understand. So it doesn't matter how many lots. I understand the concept is. So between Noble and Lorraine, you're looking to somewhat meet in a fashion what this plan shows, but really looking for the flexibility moving north into high property, even though it's phase 4 on there, of a transition to housing that we all discussed that we know is a need within the community, but adjusting from this design once you get to the other side of Lorraine. Is that what I'm hearing?
Yeah, the preliminary thoughts and discussions that we've had in the past week was making sure that the area in phase 3 between Noble and Lorraine would be completed according to the pattern book. Okay. Anything north, primarily the high property, would be reassessed as possibly a new type of neighborhood.
If we have a developer that has an interest and is obviously looking to do something different than what the Mason Run book is, there's the opportunity to do that, but there's also the discussion of wanting to, get Mason Run completed as well. And if there's latitude in the discussions that we accomplish both, then we both get something that's a win from this, is what I see.
Yeah.
Okay. That's my start, but now that Mr. Buzz is speaking, I may be corrected here.
I just want to make sure we're clear on talking about when we talk about the high property, where it sits relative to this. So phase 4 is not what we would have typically referred to as being in the high property. The high property begins north of phase 4. So for my purposes in saying, okay, Crosswinds never exercised their right to purchase the high property, therefore there's the option to basically say, okay, this doesn't apply. That discussion is different from a discussion that would have to happen about phase 4, which is closer to, I'll say, the intended Lorraine extension.
Okay, that helps. Just where the lot line is as much as the opportunity to say there wasn't things exercised. The property has the potential for flexibility in how it gets developed, as long as it gets developed and is not, I'll say, completely in a different world, but yet how you transition. And I think that's part of that development plan you see planners have. How do you transition from what might be rural to urban, and that transition occurs? It's through different phases of types of homes as you get into the skyscrapers and stuff. There's a blend across from one spectrum to the other, and that's kind of what I look at. That is how we could get through phase 4 that's on there, but also into the high property. So if a developer has that interest, would be great. I'll see if there's other questions. I'll start. Go ahead. Start at the end and come back. Andrew.
Okay. So in this, essentially, this is a request for flexibility to make adjustments necessary to continue the project in order to attract developers to the project. Is that my understanding?
Yeah, we've got a developer interested now that we'd like to work with, as well as possibly attract other developers as well.
Okay. So I have a process question. As those adjustments are made, is something then submitted to the ZBA or the CPC, or does it come back to this body and we approve those changes, or is it just carte blanche, have fun, we'll see ya?
No, I think, going through the process, and Matt's the master of process, but anything related to amending the PUD would have to go before the planning commission and city council.
Okay, thank you.
That's accurate. So a change to the PUD agreement takes city council action. There are options in the PUD agreement, and I'm not saying that these are the be-all, end-all tools in the tool chest, but there are ways that talk about amendments to the pattern book being able to be approved administratively through the zoning ordinance. So that would be questions of, okay, are we talking about change to the pattern book? Are we talking about amendment to the PUD overall? I'm not saying I know the answers to what of those triggers we would suggest or not suggest until we kind of, I'll say, we want to have this 50,000 foot view discussion of, okay, is there willingness to look at some flexibility as an option? And I'll say, from my perspective, again, I think I said this before, the further north you get, the more I think that there is both legal flexibility and should be flexibility in the mind of dealing with a developer. The closer you get to has been built out, the more it should be maintain that character of that neighborhood is I'll just say one man's opinion on that, and that's maybe not legal advice. Maybe that's just me looking at it and having reviewed where it's been and where I think it could go. So I will say there will definitely be action that will come either through site plan review committee, which is what it was referred to at the time in the PUD agreement, or if it takes amendment to the PUD agreement, there'll be city council action on that. And I will say removing the high property from this agreement will take city council action. Now, the city council has the, I'll say, sole discretion according to the agreement to do that, but we would come back to you to say we think that's an appropriate thing to do at this time.
Councilman brings up a point, there's a process to get there, which makes me think, because we have residents in the Mason Run, and obviously they've lived there for many years, and whether they were at the first day or most recently, they've bought into this concept of what the Mason Run is, style of home, location, amenities. But I'm recognizing there's also the deficiencies of not filling in property. So I would hope that there will be, because if changing those requires the public input, which we would do anyways, but I would think that we'd do that even before we got that far. I'd rather have some dialogue and input up front with the residents of Mason Run, as opposed to the very end when you've got plans and, planning commission and others have weighed in, because to me, we need that support as well. I mean, the high property, sure, we could move probably from here, Mr. Buzz, move forward, but how do we make that transition? And how do we try to meet the needs that the residents are looking for as well, especially if the lots are right next to the houses they own, so they won't want to desire to have that style.
And part of the discussion, there's also a homeowner association in part of the neighborhood, not all of it. And so when Vince and Matt and I were chatting last week, we intentionally said we wanted to reach out to both those who are part of the HOA, as well as those who live north of Noble who are not part of the HOA, and get their perspective as well. And so when the resident called me this morning, I said, well, timely, you should call, because you were going to be one of the people that I reached out to after tonight. So they're
Ryan,
interested.
And then I'll come back this way.
Your Honor, how many lots are there available to build on right now in the area you're speaking of here?
26.
26 total lots. And out of those 26 total lots, would you say there's some difficulty in building on some of them, or are they all pretty much still intact? Or, because as the mayor was alluding to, we have a ponding area out there that could, bring a problem to us.
Well, I should say there's 26 parcels. Some of those parcels that are assigned by the assessor's office have not been divided by the site plan, so there could be more. I don't know the number that are distinctly buildable based on the condition right now.
Okay, so that it's not a relatively large project, but it's more like a medium-sized project for a builder that they could pretty much take on.
I would say too, that's part of phase 3 and 4. That doesn't include the high property. So I think if
Right.
we're having a larger discussion, it also doesn't include the city-owned property that's phase 5 south of Noble as well. So we need to look at it holistically in terms of the phase 5, 3, 4, and the impact any changes would have on that, and then also the high property going north.
Okay, and also Lorraine Street, that's currently not going through and connected. Would that be connected at this time point? Or would that be part of the plans?
It does go over the Mason Run.
It does,
The way
yeah.
that culvert was approved here a few years back, it sat there for a while, and we put that in. So over into the other neighboring residential, it does get over the culvert, and then it just turns into the Mason Run. It doesn't come straight all the way down, though.
That's all I have. Thank you.
I have
Michelle?
a question about the PUD.
Councilman?
So I understand the PUD, the current PUD, is it dead or is it ongoing, even though he didn't fulfill the promise of maybe purchasing the rest of the property?
So all of the requirements in the PUD agreement, as well as the pattern book, are also assigned to the successors and heirs to the original
Okay,
party. So even though Crosswinds is bankrupt, anybody who buys a parcel within the Mason Run neighborhood,
bothered in.
yes.
All right, so then amending the PUD would be to our benefit for the developer. So I'm, just so I'm understanding it correctly, yes?
I think so. I mean, as Mr. Buds mentioned, it sat in this condition for almost 23 years now. And so I think we have to possibly look at doing something different.
I think we should, yes, thank you.
Councilwoman Biden, do you have any questions, thoughts?
No, you brought up
I'm just going down the line.
the
so-
resident who's been regularly visiting about the driveway setbacks, garage thing. So you brought that up, and just to be clear, you say we won't be visiting that right now?
Not that particular property. I know he doesn't live there anymore either, so.
Okay, yeah, that was my only question. Were we gonna include the people who were already there? So you already answered my questions. Thank you.
Thanks, Kelly. Councilwoman?
All I got to say about this is, it's been a long time. It's 23 years and things change over time, and I think we really need to look at changing this. That's my opinion.
Yeah, go ahead, yes.
I'm just curious about your opinion about how close the houses are together. Do you think that discourages some people from buying in that area? And if you do, is part of this new plan to make bigger lots or no?
I think everybody has their own preference in terms of the spacing of where they buy. I think some people bought in the neighborhood because of the tight knit, unique characteristics that we tried to replicate with the new urbanism concepts. In my mind, to the mayor asked earlier about changing the lot widths. I don't see us doing that, and so I think it's still going to be a close neighborhood. I still think they're going to be pretty close together.
So I guess I'll follow up that because I want to make sure I understand too, but moving forward outside the Mason Run and moving forward past Lorraine, there's greater options for that though, for
Yeah.
different size lots that could be larger.
Yeah, I think just the conversations administration has had to this point is phases 3 and 4 would be relatively left the same as Mason Run was established and as it's been built so far. But looking to the mayor's point at the high property moving north, is there different concepts and different ideas and layouts and programs that we can look at?
Which would include lots and sizes and configurations. Okay. All right. Councilwoman, any questions?
The only question I have we had anyone else that was interested in building on that land?
I've been here 6 years and I haven't talked with anybody.
Yeah. Well, maybe it's time that we, think about doing something with it because we've had people come here before that were not satisfied because things weren't finished or whatever. And this could be our opportunity to make it a better neighborhood.
On this evening, depending on time, we were going to cover an update on council's goals and objectives. But last year, when we set the goals and objectives, we wanted to look at doing 2 sub-area plans a year. This year, of course, as you know, recently we worked on the Heritage Corridor update in the Orchard East neighborhood. One of the projects we were going to tackle this year was actually doing a plan for the high property. and putting out an RFP and seek out developers to implement that residential development. So I think this moves into that project, and it's just nudged a little further since we've had somebody come to us.
I'll just say a few years before the 6 years, I recall that there was a developer that had an interest, but that goes way back, and it just shows that the structurally, the difficulty was to carry it out. And it wasn't a long conversation because they had different belief and concept, thought that we'd just take the other property that's vacant, we'll do all these things, and it ended very quickly because of where it's at. So how do we make this work now and make the blend as we move forward? So, all right, Mark, thank you. Vince?
Just as a follow-up, just talking with, in this case, with the developer, and it's really kind of where the housing market is that, he referred to himself as a production type of residential builder. They've got a very set, very specific, number of different units that they can build, and they know how to do it, what the costs are, and those details. And so this is a little bit out of their realm, but that they're also willing to take a look at some of the infill. But the bigger high property, clearly there'd be some interest in there with, type of developments that they've done elsewhere. So, but this is Matt and Mark alluded to. This is a high level start. More details will have to come, working their way through, not only council but planning commission and certainly outreach to those in Mason Run to bring it back for some decision in the future. So.
If I may, real quick, Mayor, talking about the production type, we've experienced this with the Lazy Boy site as well, and others who, you're talking with that are going to build 20 plus houses. Most of the residential developers have their own set floor plans. They're unique and they're different, and they can make a neighborhood look very good. But they're designed to be sort of, I don't want to say mass produced, but it's a larger scale. It's not like when you're talking with somebody to build on 6 vacant city lots across the city, where you can do it in a little more unique character with smaller formats and smaller number of lots. So we're going to run into this on several large tracts that we're trying to develop for residential.
Thank you. I just ask again, as I know you already have, and I'm sure as this gets, I guess, seen or recognized by the residents, including Mason Run, there'll be questions and you'll get calls. So just soon make the calls and say, yes, we have a plan looking at that, whatever that time it is, to really with the homeowners association, and those that aren't, the opportunity just to, this is like the first step, but, I'd be interested in their position as well. But in 23 years, it hasn't moved. So we really need to, at some point, get generation of movement forward, or we'll just continue to have vacant property.
Yeah, and what I reiterated to the resident that I talked to this morning, we're not proposing large drastic changes that are going to completely affect the feel of the neighborhood that they bought in.
Right.
So we're looking at minor incremental on how we can move this project forward.
Thanks, Mark.
Thank you.
Vince?
Your Honor, if I'm not sure we're going to have much time to go into discussion, but I'm just going to hand out just the update with the goals. And then we can, if you could just review them, we'll have a discussion, because there's a few items in there that we may have to modify and rethink. Certainly I would recommend that we have a further discussion based on different conditions. So I'm just going to hand these out, and then if we could talk a little bit further at, maybe the next work session. So
That sounds good, because I do have another item I want to go over that just came up, that recognizing on the appointments I want to discuss with you and the council. Thanks. So on our agenda, we have appointments, which is item 3865. It's under the consent agenda, and it just brought to my attention an item that we passed at the last meeting had to do with the LET, Lake Erie Transit, and the amendment to the agreement, and now has Bedford Township as a board member that's on there. And neglected to put on the appointment list the person that was being recommended, that we as a council, because we're a member, have to approve, and as well, so Lake Erie Transit can hold their next meeting with the member. So what I'm asking is that, and I did had a brief conversation with Clerk Lavoy, so it's under the consent agenda. So when we get there, I'd ask that item 3865, appointments to boards and commission, be pulled and then placed under council action. And the adjustment I'm asking council to consider, to add to the appointment list, the Lake Erie Transit Bedford Township member appointment to the board. So it's the Lake Erie Transit Bedford Township member appointment to the board. And that is Al Pryor, who is the Assistant Township Supervisor. And if we could pull that item, ask for the addition of the inclusion of Assistant Township Supervisor Pryor, then we can make sure that this be approved by our council, so he could attend and be a member of the next meeting in the early February. Any questions or concerns? Seeing none. So Vince, that's the only thing I have. I'll don't for there's we probably have a couple minutes here if there's something that maybe other council members have regarding the agenda that you always ask for. On the regular council meeting agenda. Any questions on anything? I don't see any. Mr. Pastor, I'll come back to you. Anything finally
Nothing
have?
else for the work session, Your Honor.
Okay. I look forward to the goals and objectives. Thank you very much for the information provided. So I know that there's some that, as we talked about last time, things that have been achieved, some things that are, I think we still have the opportunity to complete here in our second year of this term. So if there's no other comments from council, we need a motion to adjourn because this is a special meeting.
Motion to adjourn.
Oh, wait, stop. I'm sorry. Because it is a special meeting, it requires public comment, as we always do at meetings, not just every work session. So we discussed other items that our time permits. If you'd hold your motion there, Councilman Lamore. At this time, is there any public comment? This is related to the special meeting we just had. When we get into our regular meeting, there'll also be opportunity for public comment at that time. So when we hold these, I'll just ask again. Yes, sir. If you step forward, you come to the podium, just state your name, residence, address, or residence of jurisdiction, and same rules apply here as the regular meeting. You have 3 minutes, sir.
My name is Brent Huber. I'm a Mason Run. I've been a Mason Run homeowner for the past 21 years, and I love the ideas for north of Noble. But for the phase 5, it would be wonderful if you could keep the aesthetics of what's behind there. The reason why it's phase 5 is because that spot was originally supposed to be phase 3, but they had to remove the basement from the factory. So that's why they renumbered all of the phases. And the retention pond, that was originally from when they were building the area, they were taking dirt out of there to fill in the spots of the houses and everything. That's why that pond's there. There's something else I wanted to say. Originally, it was Jim Tischler that was one of the original planners of the neighborhood. I love Mason Run. I've been there for 21 years. I own a home in Mason Run 1, which has the homeowners association, and I own a home in Mason Run 2, where there is no homeowners association. So I have both things, and my only concern is with the properties that are 35 feet wide. You're not really going to be able to get a really decent house, a new style house in that lot. So if you could revise some of the lot sizes, to get houses in there, like a ranch or something like that. My house that I own in Mason Run 2 is a ranch. It is a 35-foot wide lot. I have 5 feet at one side, 5 feet at one side. And there's probably about 15 feet between the house and the garage. So it's great for a retirement home in a couple of years, well, 20 years. But, I would love to keep the aesthetics past behind our Mason Run 1. That would be wonderful. I know that part has not been developed yet with sewer or anything yet, but phase or north of Noble, yeah, and mix houses. It's all throughout Monroe. You have that. If you go down Hollywood Avenue, you have two-story colonials, you have ranch houses. So it can be done. It would be wonderful because when I moved here 21 years ago, this was a big thing to have all these houses. There was supposed to be a school in that area. Some of the lots were supposed to have townhomes on there. So there's a lot of stuff in that pattern book that I still to this day don't really understand. But if we could just move forward, get that done, it would be so much better. And you would bring so much more revenue into this town. And we need more people in this town. And that's it.
Thank you for your comments. And we do see Mr. Tischler periodically when we're in Lansing or other places. He's still around, still operating, still busy with the state, so.
Is he in
Yeah,
East Coast now?
no, he's back. He's back in the state in Lansing, so, yeah. We'll probably get a call from him too, so. Other public comments at this time? I should have opened the public meeting, so I'll just start public comments, so I'll just say, okay, we're closed for public comments. And Councilman Lamore.
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
Motion by Councilman Lamore, supported by Councilman Felder to adjourn. Clerk, please call the roll.
Councilperson Whitman? Yes. Stilgrave?
Yes.
Vining?
Yes.
Jermaine?
Yes.
Lamore?
Yes.
Felder?
Yes.
Mayor Clark?
Yes.